Saunders County 4-H members, and welcome. My name is Shayna Meyer, and myself, along with my husband Brandon, own and operate Lucky and Boar Goats. We are located actually just south of you in northern Lancaster County, and we raise show quality boar goats. We were actually asked by Cole Meter, your extension educator, to do a kind of a short introductory video into your Catch-A-Goat project. And so what I'm going to be doing in this video is really just going over the very basics of what to expect when you bring your goat home, nutrition, some like medicinal health management type things. We're going to talk about hoof care, and really just I'm going to approach this from the standpoint that you are either new to livestock or you're new to goats. And so this is not going to be at all in depth. This is going to be very beginner, novice type knowledge, just to get you started. And so you feel more comfortable with your project and you can be as successful as possible. You're presumably your first or second year into goats. So with that, let's get started. What we're going to talk about first is how to prepare for your project and what that is going to look like. My recommendation from my experience is that you start out, if possible, if you have the resources or the materials readily available, to provide a fenced-in area, the fence being approximately 4 feet high. We use 5-foot high cattle panels. The next thing that I'm going to suggest is obviously some type of enclosure to protect your animal from the elements. And I am under the assumption that most of you will probably only have your projects between the summer months, so late spring to late summer. And so you're not going to need to prepare to overwinter them, which looks a little bit different, but for the summer, you're at least going to want to have a 3-sided structure with a roof so that they have a shade, but enough free moving air so that they can find a reasonable way to stay cool in the summer. With that in mind, you should also prepare some type of space for you to be able to catch your goat, because even the tamest goats that we sell, when they're new to somebody else, when they go to a new home, goats, they can take a little while to warm up to you. And so that actually leads me into my next point. When you actually bring your goat home, what I recommend is actually do not try to break them. Don't even try to catch them when you first bring them home. I would at least give them a solid week of you just going out into the pen to, I don't know, if you still have homework, if it's still that time of year, sit out in the pen and read a book, do your homework, just spend time being around your goat. You will be surprised. We have had anywhere from super tame goats show up on our farm to goats that are not tame whatsoever, and eventually even the craziest goat that we've ever had, and these are usually mature does, so it is different, but even the orneriest of animals, you just need to spend time with them. And so don't spend that, that first initial experience that they have with you chasing them around and trying to halter break them or getting them all worked up. Literally all you have to do, or my best suggestion would be to just spend time with them. So sit down in the pen, don't try and chase them down, don't even try to get them to come to you. Goats are very curious. Even the ones that are exceptionally ornery are very curious, and usually if you sit there long enough, they will give in and start snooping. And so let them come to you, let them get warmed up. You don't want them overstressed anyway, because maybe they're only traveling 20 minutes, which to you doesn't seem like a big deal, but for any animal, moving locations can be very stressful. So what we're going to talk about next is goat nutrition. And like I had mentioned earlier, we are going to make this very basic, because on our personal YouTube channel, I here soon am going to create a video regarding our nutrition program and how we run our program year round. And nutrition is very, very complex based on the age of the animal, the stage of production, what your goals are with that animal. And so for your purposes, we're going to make this very, very simple. And these are my recommendations, but one of the easiest things that you can do to get started is, and especially with all animals, but especially with an animal that you're trying to get them to reach a certain weight, or you have a very specific production goal for them, fresh water daily, or even multiple times a day. If you even read on any bag of feed, anything that you come across, that is one of the recommendations that it will say everywhere is fresh water. And so what that will look like, and I feel like I don't see enough kids do this. And even Brandon and I can be bad about it at shows when we go to compete because we get busy. But they need fresh water daily, if not twice a day. So for your specific situation where you only may have 1 or 2 animals in a pen, I'm going to suggest getting, and now for the life of me, I can't think of how large the bucket is, but just a little black rubber bucket. And it has a metal handle on it, and you can get a carabiner, is that what they're called? And you can clasp that to your fence, and you can leave it sit there for them to get water out of. The next thing that I'm going to recommend is some type of hay source, whether that is, and again, I could go into the details as to which one and why, but that's not the purpose of this video. Some type of, whether it be prairie brome or alfalfa, some type of long stem roughage, have that available for them. Before I go any further with that, when you get into the specifics of show wethers and show does and really getting competitive, you're going to hear people say that you should only be giving them basically, I don't even know how to measure it, a handful, like literally a handful of long stem roughage a day. And that is not something, when you're just starting out, they're going to be just fine. Don't read too far into all the things for wethers. Just trust me, long stem roughage, they are going to do, they are a goat, they are a ruminant animal, they are meant to digest long stem forage, and so that is more than adequate to provide prairie hay, some type of grass hay, prairie brome, alfalfa is excellent. So yeah, provide them, and not just a type of forage, but a clean forage. And so nothing that is moldy, nothing that was put up wet, and so it will become moldy or it'll sour, because that is also a sure way to make any animal sick. But for sure, goat, you want your goats to have clean hay. That is something that we do with our animals, and it is very labor intensive, but we have seen the effects of accidentally giving a goat moldy hay, just because we know that it's not good. It's not good for them. It's not good for their health. It's not good for them nutritionally to have mold. And then lastly, some type of feed. Now, what I mean by that, some type of grain, there are textured feeds and there are pelleted feeds. Now, a pellet is just that. It's just a pellet that's been compressed from a mixture of different, grains and solubles and different things mixed together at a mill, at a feed mill. But then textured feeds, that's another form where you can literally see all the individual, well, for the most part, all the individual feeds are separate but mixed together. And so honestly, again, you're going to find a million different opinions once you start to get further into this. My very basic suggestion for feeding any animal that will cover most things pretty well is to find a feed that is 16% protein and 3% fat. That's a really basic starting point. That's going to cover everything, and it's going to keep them growing healthy. Now, you're going to, again, run into a million different opinions on fat, protein, fiber, what other ingredients should be in it and what not. This is just a basic starting point. I would recommend contacting one of your local co-ops. So I think Frontier is the co-op or the cooperative, the major cooperative in Saunders County. And so I would suggest contacting a branch through Frontier. I know CPM, Central Plains Milling, They also offer products through the Frontier locations. And so we have a feed that we use that we absolutely love through Frontier that has worked wonders for us. And it's affordable. So what I'm saying, find something that you can afford. 16% protein, 3% fat is a really good starting point. In terms of the amount to feed, we full creep our animals up until they're a year. And so what that means is we give them what they can eat every day. Whatever they'll consume, we will feed them to their consumption. Unless they start to get, so like our does, and I should preface this by saying we are not at the point, we do not show wethers, we raise wethers, but our children aren't old enough yet in 4-H to compete. We're still a few years out. And so even I'm not super knowledgeable or not knowledgeable enough to give specific education on a wether feeding program. But in terms of like a show doe or a show buck, feeding them out, so like my show does, they'll be fed full feed until they start to get a little too chunky, and then we start to back them down a little bit. So once they've reached that natural max where they just have that good fleshy bloom to them, we'll full feed them, and then we'll start to pull them back. But that's getting a little too specific. But anyway, what my point is that you, for your project, just assume you're easily going to be putting out 2 pounds a day. That's a really safe number. Your specific animal may not eat 2 pounds, or they may want more than 2 pounds if you want to see a faster rate of gain for them. It's a little situational, but 2 pounds is a really good place to start. So a pound in the morning, a pound at night. Again, if you Google any of this, you're going to find so many different answers all the way across the board. You're going to add in supplements and all sorts of crazy things. This is just the beginners. This is a good place to start, and then you can piece together the knowledge once you get through your first year or your first couple experiences showing goats. Another thing regarding nutrition that I missed earlier, is that do not feed them on the ground. And what I mean by that is goats are foragers. They are not grazers. And so they are not like cattle. They're not meant to eat with their faces down. And that maybe sounds strange, but you want them to eat with their faces up or off the ground, because you don't want them eating where they poop. Because one thing that I haven't talked about yet is managing parasites. And that is a simple way to manage manage against consuming parasite matter, is keep them from eating. So never feed them directly on the ground. Huge no-no, don't feed them on the ground. I would not suggest feeding them in a bowl, because you're going to see pretty quickly that you pour it in the bowl and the first thing they do is stand in the bowl, or I swear it's like they turn right back around and poop in the bowl. Like, it just happens so fast. But or they somehow aim, I don't know. But I would get some type of a hanging feed or something to put on the fence to keep their butt as far away from where their feed is as possible, so that they have the least they are less likely to poop in their food, because you don't want them to consume their own or others' fecal matter, because that is what increases the transmission of parasites of the worm eggs. And then once they consume those, then it increases their own parasite loads. Let's talk a little bit about your animal health and some of the things that I would recommend that you keep on hand for just having livestock at home. I mean, not even necessarily goats, even though these are goat specific, or my recommendations based on raising goats. Two items that I think you should start with are B complex and CDT. When you bring your animal home, the first thing that you should do is give them 1 cc per 20 pounds of B complex. And the reason for that is, like I had spoken about earlier, stress can wreak havoc on animals, especially on goats, and polio. So polio is what sorry, I said that wrong, is caused by a disruption of B1, which is thymine, a disruption of thymine production in their rumen. And that's usually brought on by stress or some type of feed change, or something has changed and it has caused the rumen some upset. And so when polio happens, usually one of the first symptoms is blindness, or they act like disoriented, or it'll appear that way. And the easiest way to help head that off is to give them a shot of either straight thymine or B complex. B complex, you're going to be able to pick that up at Orscheln's or TSC or Baumgart's. And that is a subcutaneous shot. So you tent the skin and you insert the needle between like the open pocket between the skin and the muscle, and you give 1 cc per 20 pounds to the animal. And this is literally, I just call it like a booster. So you're giving them a booster of thymine to just help roll them over through that stressful period. The second thing that I said was CDT. And the reason that I say CDT is that one of the easiest things to treat ahead of time, to just avoid dealing with it altogether, is overeating disease. And that is literally when, to give my super simple layman's terms description, overeating disease is when an animal overconsumes a product, and then the bacteria that are already existing in the animal's stomach, so that food enters their stomach, it sits because there's so much it can't be digested fast enough, and then the microbes are allowed to flourish in the food that has been left, or I should say the bacteria is allowed to flourish in that food that is just sitting there. And as that bacteria flourishes, it releases a toxin that is toxic to the animal, that it's poisonous to the animal. And so that is what the CDT vaccine is for, is to prevent against overeating disease. And especially with this type of project where you are feeding them to reach a production goal, they will be taking in a lot of feed. And so this is a healthy way to prevent that issue from occurring. Another item that I suggest you have on hand is penicillin. I jokingly refer to it as the Band-Aid of the livestock world, because it never hurts to have it on hand, regardless of the situation. If you're not sure what's going on, and you're concerned, they have a fever, they have an injury, you can always start with penicillin, and that will at least potentially cover whatever the issue is before you can get in contact with a vet or somebody knowledgeable to help treat what the actual issue is. So penicillin is not going to treat everything, but it's like how I explained it to my husband when we were talking about this. Penicillin, when you refer to it as the Band-Aid of the livestock world, a Band-Aid isn't going to treat a broken bone, but it's going to stop the bleeding. And so that's kind of the same thing with penicillin. It's not going to work in every situation, but it may prevent other problems from snowballing. And it's just a good starting point, and that's my recommendation. For an antibiotic to keep on hand. It's readily available at TSC, Orscheln's. It's everywhere. You don't need a prescription for penicillin. Unfortunately, when it comes to medicinal stuff, I could probably give hundreds of recommendations for all the different things that we see all the time in terms of products and what works and everything like that. How could I forget? And a thermometer, because you need to know if your animal's running a fever. Thermometer. And not the one that your family uses, because they will not appreciate that. The normal temperature for a goat is approximately 101.5 to 103.5. But with that in mind, if they're around 101.5, you may want to check that temperature again a little bit to make sure it's not dropping. And if they're around 103.5, you may want to check it again in a little bit to make sure it's not climbing. The most ideal range is 102 to 103, but just like humans, their range can fluctuate too. And especially if it's hot out, it can fluctuate. So, and one important thing, this will roll nicely into the next point that I want to talk about, is parasites, worms, are just a natural part of owning goats. And it is normal to a certain extent for all goats to have parasites. That is just the nature of goats. But there does come a point where you can have too heavy of parasite loads, and what that will cause is unthriftiness, so they won't gain weight, or they'll start losing weight, their coat condition. You want an animal to have a very sleek, especially in the summer, sleek, smooth, shiny coat, a healthy looking coat. If their coat starts to look rough, if they start to lose hair, if their hair starts to curl, the first thing that I would look into is checking their poop to see if their poop is the right consistency, and goats should always just have the little balls that they drop. If they're starting to clump together, if they have like what I call the dog poops or diarrhea, the first thing that I would consider is deworming them. The next step in that process, outside of checking the poop and the overall condition of the animal, is then checking their FAMACHA score. And what the FAMACHA score is it's actually checking for anemia in the goat. So you're seeing if there is enough red blood cells in your goat. And what that looks like is you're going to take, you can, excuse me, you can YouTube for videos that will show you, and I think there's actually maybe even a official FAMACHA site that you can even get registered on that will tell you if you're checking the FAMACHA right. But you're going to take your thumb, you're going to press in the top eyelid into the eye, and then you're going to take your finger and roll down. I'm not going to do it with my own eye because that's kind of weird, but you're going to roll down that lid and look on the inside of that bottom lid, and there is a little chart. You can Google FAMACHA goats, and it's going to come up with a little chart that has like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it's different colors, and you want a dark red. So you're only going to have them for a few months. Start out right by not feeding them on the ground. Don't let them eat where they poop. Check their FAMACHA, keep an eye on their body condition, and keep an eye on their poop to make sure that they are having their normal tiny little ball poops. Last thing that we are going to cover that really nobody, I think, gives enough attention to. Hoof care is something that it's super, super simple, and it's even easier when you don't let it get away from you, especially with young animals. Their hooves are just so much more easily manipulated than adults, and so you can get a super cheap pair of, they're just hoof, are they called nippers? Hoof trimmers. Again, TSC Orscheln's, Tractor Supply, and that is not, it's just like trimming your nails, and there are a million videos out there. I would suggest at least, especially since they are on, presumably they're getting a lot of hay and a lot of feed, their hooves are going to grow possibly fast. Some goats grow really slow, some grow really, really fast. So I would at least check them maybe even every 2 weeks to start, just to kind of get a feel for how fast their hooves are going to grow. So yeah, hoof care is super simple, but I really think it's overlooked when it comes to, you know, when people are just getting into goats, and it's maybe not taken for how serious it can be and the problems that it can cause. So unfortunately, Cole has only given me about 20 minutes to do this video, and I'm pretty sure I've already gone over my 20 minutes, so he's probably not going to be happy with that. But there is just so much to talk about, and I have only barely grazed the surface with so many subjects. I hope that you find this helpful. I hope that you enjoy your project. With that, I wish you all the best of luck with your Catch a Goat projects, and you will probably see me around at fair time. And so I can't wait to watch you guys, and I wish you nothing but the best. So with that, I will see you this summer.